guys, Sean C6 here. So I've had quite a few requests on a couple other videos for an updated guide on my Cold Tempest monk. So this is the most up-to-date one that I'm going to have. I'll start out with what I do for high greater rifts. I'm currently at rank 119 on the solo non-season monk leaderboards. Did 46 in 12 minutes and 43 seconds using Tempest. After that, I'll go through what I do for T6 speedruns, and then maybe some other possibilities of gear and what I wouldn't do, what other people have recommended, but I disagree with. Alright, so for high greater rifts, I've been using the Templar. It gives you an extra 10% spirit generation. So that allows you to forego some stuff off of your gear and skills, which I switch in Relentless Assault instead of Exalted Soul. So you deal 20% more damage to enemies that are blind, frozen, or stunned. So every time you're going to drop, you'll use Blinding Flash. That's basically a 20% damage increase straight up. So really good to use. Otherwise, I'll use Harmony for massive resistances. Momentum, since you're always running, another 20% pure damage. And Beacon of Utar, because you need pretty big cooldowns. As a side note that I forgot to mention, I'm at, it says 64.99% cooldown. So 65% cooldown. And I find that spirit generation is pretty decent for everything that I mentioned. So as far as other skills go, Tempest Rush, Flurry, obviously that's the entire point of the build. Mantra of Conviction, I use Annihilation because I really like the move speed. You could use Overawe if you want, but it's basically a 6% increase. I'd rather the move speed, so I use that. It seems to work pretty good. Epiphany Insight, that is your primary spirit generation. So 45 per second when it's active, plus you get your gain from anything else like reduce resource cost to help you cape your spirit up. Breath of Heaven, I use Blazing Wrath because I find I don't need the heals as much if I'm using Serenity all the time. My primary healing is actually Potion, and this is just kind of like a little bonus. So using Blazing Wrath, I get an extra 10% damage constantly up also. And then I'm using Serenity Ascension. So 4-second invincibility. With the cooldown I have, it's pretty much, I think it's a 60 or 67% uptime. So more times than not, you're invincible. Not permanently, but decent amount. And then Blinding Flash, Faith, and the Light. So you deal 29% increased damage for 3 seconds after using Blinding Flash. Huge damage boost. As far as my Paragon go, I like to have some maximum spirit. Sometimes I will go 50 into here because I'm not using Exalted. And then a little bit of Vita usually, and then the rest into Dexterity. It doesn't really matter as long as you can maintain your spirit. You can kind of do whatever in here. I always recommend having maximum move speed. So the main things on here, you're gonna need your cooldown reduction first and foremost. Crit chance and crit damage will come most important after that. Attack speed, you kind of have to be careful with because that uses more spirit with the more attack speed you have. So if you can't maintain, maybe try and don't put any in attack speed. Defensive, life, armor, resist all. Life regen here isn't really going to do much. I have over 800,000 life, so 5,000 a second is pretty minor. These ones don't overly matter. Life on hit, man, might help a little bit. Reduce resource cost is really nice to have. It'll help with the spirit mitigation. So I'd go reduce resource cost first. Area damage is a little bonus. Life on hit, little bonus. Gold find doesn't matter at all. So for this build in particular, I swap to Utar's Roar It is a 1.3 attacks per second weapon, so it uses less spirit. If I don't have Exalted Solon, it's nice to not have to worry about spirit. And then obviously Unity. So, have the Mercenary with Unity also. You gain the 50% damage reduction bonus. Another thing about the Mercenary, it's really nice to have an S of Johan on him. He'll actually suck enemies in with it also. So chance on hit to pull enemies towards your target and slow them by 80%. So he'll do that. He'll bring a big group in, and then you can drop your stacks on that group, and it's a nice little bonus. So going around the other gear, other weapon, I'm using a Born's Furious Wrath. So this is craftable. It's fairly easy to get a pretty good one. You're going to want cooldown here, cooldown here. Otherwise, it's not a big deal what you get. Ideally, I'd say damage. If you really wanted toughness, you could, but I'd probably go for damage and cooldown. Like that one. I'm using Crimson's boots and belt. So I get the 10% cooldown there also. It's also nice for the reduced resource cost and res a little bit. Those can also both be crafted, so it's really easy to get a really good version really quick as soon as you have some mats. Hexing Pants and Mr. Yan. These are probably the hardest part of the build to actually get because so much of it is crafted and simple. So these are crucial. So your resource generation and damage is increased by 25% while moving and decreased while standing still. So Tempest, you're always moving. You're always going to gain generation and you're always going to gain damage. So that's massive. It'd be really hard to maintain the spirit without that, plus a huge damage boost. Who doesn't want that? So to go along with the Born Sword, I'm using a Born's Chest. And with all the sets, I'm also using a Ring of Grandeur. So only need one less set piece for Borns, Crimsons, Elghilds, and Sunwukos. So it's pretty crazy how much the Ring of Grandeur helps here. It's kind of hard to get by without it. So like I just mentioned, Sunwukos. This is the entire point of this set, is to increase the damage of these skills. So like it says on there, when your decoys explode, you gain a buff that increases damage of Cyclone Strike, Exploding Palm, Lash and Tail Kick, Tempest Rush, and Wave of Light by 500% for 3 seconds. Tempest Rush, 500% damage. Tempest Rush Flurry, that on the bottom there where it says the damage of the explosion is increased by 150% weapon damage as cold while channeling, that actually stacks up here. So you can see it going up there. It's around 20 right now. So that is what stacks up. So it's 150% times how many stacks you have for when you drop it. It can go up to 100. So 15,000% damage. And then you're using Sunwukos, which is 500% of that. So that's 75,000% damage. So with this current setup, I've got hits all the way up to 13 billion damage. Here we go. Which is pretty crazy if you stack it all the way up. Normally I'd probably stack to maybe 20 to 30. Then it's not that big of a deal if you miss something or don't crit or anything. And around there I'm still getting around maybe 3 billion damage a hit. So it works out pretty good. Continuing on. Sunwukos helmet, Sunwukos Ami to go along with the gloves. So 4-piece set bonus from those 3 plus Ring of Grandeur. And then I'm using Elghild's shoulders and Elghild's bracers, which are both crafted again. Really easy to get good ones. 15% damage against elites and 15% damage reduced from elites, and 7% gain for reduction of melee and ranged also. So it's pretty good toughness increase. There's other possibilities that you could use instead. I find this to be the most consistent and easiest to use with the reduction on it. So for when I'm running T6 speed runs, there's a few different things I'll use. So everything else is pretty much the same except for 3 things. Relentless Assault, I'll go back to Exalted Soul. Harmony, I'll go to Fleet-Footed. So number 1, I change my passives. I don't really need the toughness because T6 is kind of a joke and you can just smash through it all. I will change my weapon back to an Azurath, which I'd say is better overall, but it's harder to maintain the resources, so that's why I went back to Exalted Soul. It doesn't really matter. Everything gets smashed in T6 anyways. And I will go to an SOJ instead of a Unity, because again, toughness doesn't really matter. Everything just gets smashed anyways. So I'll switch ring, I'll switch weapon, and I'll switch my passives. And it can destroy T6 like a joke. Okay, so gems I often get asked about. I use Bane of the Trapped. It's cold damage, so stuff is under control and pairing effects constantly. So they're chilled, they're frozen, they're blinded, any of that. So Bane of the Trapped, massive gains. Taiga, again, you're constantly channeling, so it's always going to be up unless you screw something up. So once you get it this high, it actually stacks over 70, which I believe would be 35% damage increased and 35% armor increased. So it makes your toughness and damage go through the roof. For a third one, I'm using Bane of the Powerful. So pretty straightforward, 15% damage against elites, 20% after you kill an elite, and I have it up to 80 seconds, so it's pretty much always on. Maybe not on the Rift Guardian if it's taking like 4 minutes or something, but really good gem to use also. Other possibility is that if you don't have the exact gear or something isn't working out for you, you could always use a Vigilante belt for 8% cooldown, and then that opens up boots if you want to use Ice Climbers, or you could use Crudus boots if you're running out of Spirit. Crudus boots plus Air Ally, you get a huge 200 Spirit boost every time you activate it. Problem is you'll have to lose Breath of Heaven 10% damage and heals, or Blinding Flash 29% damage, so I'd say overall not worth it unless you really needed the Spirit. There's Krelm's Bracers. They stop you from being stunned or knocked back, which will stop channeling, but I don't find it to be too big of an issue. It's every once in a while it'll be annoying, but I would say it wouldn't be worth losing the 15% reduction and 15% damage for. So I'll just stick with Elguilds for now. You can use Krelm's Bracers if you want, and then potentially opens up a Born's Shoulders and then whatever chest armor you want. So there's a couple variances. Another thing I hear a lot is people saying that I should be using a Furnace or a Flying Dragon. So number 1, the Furnace. It can be okay. The problem is the slower weapons, two-handers, it actually stacks the channeling of Tempest slower. So you might get more damage per stack, but in the amount of time, so I got to 40 there and I could drop it, you might only be to 20 with a two-hander. So more damage multiplied by a smaller stack isn't more damage. I found it to be about the same, but then you're also losing the cooldown and other stats from the weapons set bonuses, so I'd say not worth it overall. If it's all you have, you can still do the build with it. It is easier to maintain the Spirit, but not my preference. I hear Flying Dragon all the time. People think the other way. If you have huge attack speed if it procs, then your stacks will go up really fast. That is true, but that also means your resource cost is going to be huge. So as soon as Flying Dragon procs, your resource is smashed to the ground, you can't maintain it, and you lose the stacks. It's a waste of time. I would never use that. So I think that's about it. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. There's also a couple other videos that I have up of old builds, higher runs that I have finished. Kind of a general thing about this build. But take a look there. If you don't see something that you're curious about, let me know and just ask a question and I'll see if I can answer it. But thanks for watching and have a good one.